You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos.
All right, everybody, welcome to episode 78 of Here for the Truth podcast. With us here today, we have Michael Tsarion. Now, none of what you see or hear would be possible without his life and work. Yerasimos and I first connected through his podcast, Unslaved, hosted with David Whitehead. He's, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, one of the most prominent thinkers and researchers alive today. And when we say we stand on the shoulders of giants, Michael's certainly the key person that we're referring to. And it's simply such a pleasure to have you here today, Michael. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. It's great to see you. And again, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, man, definitely. Thank you so much. And I echo what Joel said. You've had a major influence on my life, and I don't think I've been taking the path I've been taking the last few years without the work that you've done and the knowledge that you've shared. So, man, it's just so much love and so much respect. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to start off, just get a little bit into your hero's journey and your major rites of passage. You've been on this independent researching journey for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, maybe longer. And so I'd love to just hear a little bit about that, the main things that kind of inspired you to take the road less traveled.
That's a really endless subject, actually, because I'm still on it. You know what I mean? We're all on it together. It's really hard to pinpoint one particular thing, but of course, being exposed to the New Age movement and similar paths, some of these were in the East as well, back in the 70s and then through the 80s, I think might have had a big effect because it just told me what wasn't right. I know, being really committed. I mean, I wasn't just an outsider. You get into it like we all do. We think this is it. And then you slowly, I don't know, I have this meter for bullshit. So, and charlatanism. And my grandfather was a very, very prominent teacher in LA back in the 70s and 80s and being exposed to him. But by about 81, 82, and then meeting him and being part of his movement in LA, very, very quickly I found out he's a fucking charlatan, and I think that had, it wasn't a downer, it was just like a recognition. And then that started to happen with a lot of people, other than he, all his movement, the extended New Age peoples. I never met one. I mean, Paul Solomon, is the person I have respect for. He is a big major figure in the New Age movement. He's about the only one that is worthy of respect. Everybody else failed the test, so to speak, at least it wasn't for me, right? So when you know what you don't want and when you see through the lie, it's really, really, really important. It's really good, it's helpful. Because then when you come upon something that's more wholesome, and I luckily did, there's studies that have been doing in the late 70s through the 80s. There was things that were just like hobbies almost. Irish mythology, etymology was a big one, symbolism, and subliminal. You guys know that I'm big time into, manipulative. The manipulation of symbolism, that was a personal hobby. Couldn't find anybody else interested in it. But as the other things washed away, and I don't want to deal with that anymore, it sort of honed. And then these other things sort of came a little bit more embossed. And then when I'd been 3 times to America, and on the third trip in late 89, I came across the work. It was this desert storm. And so I came across the work of several people who had been critiquing America's role in a sort of a geopolitical level, basically the conspiracy material. People like Reverend Jack Moore, Ralph Epperson, Nord Davis, and others, mostly Christian guys, but I loved what they were doing. And then that moved on to people like G. Edward Griffin and a whole host of other people, Ralph Epperson, Stan Monteith, and I'm just devouring this stuff. So that's pretty much probably the most accurate statement of how I got started, because knowing absolutely nothing, but having this kind of mind that didn't trust what the media said, so there are other threads, but that one really is good to go. And it's just been then, downhill from there on, right? But this thing takes you. Believe you me, there's been no will involved. This has just been hit by an avalanche and downhill into all of this from there on. What the hell?
Michael, how many books have you read in your life?
Well, I'm always reading because right now I'm reading about 25 books. I mean, you just can't get through shit.
Yeah.
Every time you think you're getting through it, right, then there's a whole heap of more, and a lot of it is contemporary, to keep up to date, and then a lot I dig into the past to have. These are like two Masonic pillars in my life. Know what the great masters of the past have said, but there's some really good writings out there. I like Douglas Murray. I like Charles Murray. I like uh, uh, Ann Coulter. Dinesh D'Souza. I'm keeping up to speed with everything that's out there. Um, uh, just loads because I've got projects as well that I need to research, and I like my research to be cutting edge. Dip into the histories of the past, some fine stuff, but there's also fine stuff being written now on the Second World War, on globalism, on Russia, on America. I'm a very, very curious person. So if you're very curious, you'll want to read. And then another thing is, that when you read, and especially if you read sort of highbrow people, they make citations themselves. They've read studies that you may never come across. So, and you can use that. You can say, "Oh my God, I never, Jesus, there's a study here about suicide or about child abuse or female psychology, whatever it may be." And they might cite. And remember, this doesn't mean that they all have my insight, but I might say, "Oh, how could you miss that? That's a really incredible study." And then you can cite those or footnote those in your own work if you want to keep it sharp and non-repetitive and up to date, also up to speed with what's happening right now. So yeah, a lot of books. I've always been a reader, and it to me is a very valuable process because there's really some really great thought. I'm reading on Abraham Lincoln. See, that I've all through my career, I've had issues and problems with certain people that have been unresolved. And in my life right now, I can say that a very great deal, 90% of all the X factors and questions I've had on my life have been answered by these Ralph Ellis's. Wherever I went in the deep search to get answers to these questions that I had, it's mostly been done, but it's never wholly done. There's always new questions. But hey, what about that? The story of Teddy Roosevelt or the study of Abraham Lincoln. That question about his or Albert Pike or somebody else. And so there's always something to go back to question Napoleon, and so on. There's always look at Churchill. So there's always going to be unfilled, until you. So the other thing I was going to say about reading is that in life you can make this. You have one short life to live and a lot of things to know. Well, you can fix that by when you have when you have an interest. Your job is really to find the greatest minds who've already spoken on it. And it might, now that seems like an overwhelming job, but it's actually not, because I said the best minds. Well, surely those are only a few. I mean, everybody listening to me now knows that, no, that's not hundreds. I said the best minds. Well, you're down to 2 people. You're down to 4 people. So find them. If it was psychology, philosophy, whatever, right? Whatever you're into, there's only going to be a handful of the people who had the deepest grasp on the truth. And even they didn't have it in total, but at least find those people. And once you've done that, your job is actually easier. So when somebody sees the overwhelmingness of, let's study, let's reading books, and they get all intimidated, yeah, but it's actually easier than you think because there's only a handful of people, which in a couple of months, you could download and get the whole story about it. You know what I mean? If you knew. Like Judaism. Yeah, well, this guy called John Allegro, ever heard of him? Yeah, well, he'll nail it for you. And Tony Bushby, and I could name him. That's why I've specialized in that. I can give you 4 names on any subject you can tell me, and that's it. You'll have the postgraduate understanding enough to floor people who are even come from the academia. So it's not just reading; it's reading the finest minds who spoke about that subject, and having the discernment to not read the rest of the trash and all the lies and all the the bunk that's coming out of academia for the most part.
Yeah, man. I mean, I love that you said that it's just a never-ending journey, and even for me, for someone who got into this truth movement through the health field first and foremost. I mean, just being exposed to thinkers like Dr. Hammer, within the last year and a half, I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? I didn't even know this was a thing.
It's look at what's out there. That is a field in which, again, it applies what I said. Find the Hummers, find the Gersons, find the Reich,
Right? Yeah.
find the Grodeks. It's not endless. people think, or they make themselves believe it's, oh, I can't learn all of that.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. But it's basic curiosity. You have to follow up your curiosity and always have these questions. So that's what animates any search that I was on. Now, remember, for me, all of this was hobby. It's a big, big difference to go out, and start doing it. That was never a plan. That all happened accidentally. All of these subjects were personal hobbies, and I would have been doing exactly what I'm doing today, getting crates of books delivered to my door, and everybody knew me as the horror of the village. Stay away from him, and I'd have been just doing it in my own garret. How the hell this happened? Or to have websites or any more public notoriety is just inexplicable to me. I have no idea how it happened, and it didn't happen by any will on my part whatsoever.
That's incredible. Was there a moment where you were like, I'm going to make a vocation out of this?
No.
No.
It was all various incidents, and they're all so unbelievable that I'm still trying to work it out. So trying to communicate it to somebody else, it sounds so comedic, so idiotic, so when I studied the tarot, the divination, that led to the mystery school, none of that was planned either, because the last thing on my mind, in fact, it's the opposite of what you said. I had a deep antipathy to ever doing astrology readings or readings of any kind, even though I was good at the subject. I didn't want clients. I didn't want them in my house. I didn't want to have the time to dedicate. Didn't want to do and classes. You have to be stark raving mad. That never even crossed my mind until I was pushed into it. At about I think it was early '98. I did my first reading for a client, and not just the stress of it and all of that, but the actual not wanting to even do it. It was all external things that happened that forced me and out of necessity. And Jesus, if anybody asked me to do something different, I would have drive a forklift truck. I would have rather done it in the Bay Area than ever moved in. So it sounds strange, but it's true. No, there was never. In fact, there's been, if anything, there's been a fight every single second of the day of how to overcome the desire to not want to do it. So yeah, it's been a struggle all the way through, because my tendency is to not bother, not do it, do other things, right? Music, whatever it may be, and study these things as a hobby. But somehow something else demands, something other than that. And I just follow it dutifully, blindly.
I think it's just amazing. I mean, it's amazing hearing you say that. Like every second of every day, I have to fight the opposite of, and yet you've written several books. You have like 15 websites. I'm just throwing that number out there. I don't know the exact number. You've written so many articles. You've created so many presentations, hours long presentation. I mean, even the Age of Manipulation video that you created a long time ago based on a workshop you did is like 11 hours long. And the female Illuminati series, everything. And then to go day moment by moment, be like, oh, I don't want to do this, but then you still do it. Is just.
Yeah, don't ask me. And I've done it on shitty equipment and shitty environments, no help. You'd wonder, why are you doing it then? So there's no answer to that. But that one, Age of Manipulation, the longer ones are done because when I started doing it, I found out that it's impossible to get the real things I want to talk about now that I have committed to it on short podcasts, especially over dial-up, because I was working at this even before, just about as Google videos came along and people were uploading. I didn't personally upload, but other people uploaded them. And then later, you get to do it yourself when the YouTube thing came along. But I realized that as you're about to express the thing that really matters, some guy's cutting you off, or whatever, or not asking the right questions, or not even really into your work and any of that. So I went, oh my God. So the reason why these ones that came later are longer, more precise, is because I was aching for that, aching for and just taking the risk that you could do. I was the first one to do anything more than 3 hours, let alone 6. First one. Go and check that. And I did it because these things, like in Origins and Oracles or Age of Manipulation, which is one of my personal favorites, you do need that length to get the message across. There is absolutely it'll do damage. It will not do justice to the subject matter if you just chop it up and chop it up and chop it up. Then to counterpoint that, we would do something that was a little bit more succinct, like say Architects of Control, right? But in general, that one was you're trying to cram everything into 2 hours, right? But normally I said, no, I'm the first one to make the decision. And I know a lot of people have emulated that. which is no, do justice to the subject. Take the fucking time. If it takes 10 hours, it takes 10 hours. And if people don't like it, that's their fucking loss.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is like, even in today's times, like people see something 10 hours, they're like, oh my God, I just want like a 2-minute soundbite fucking video to tell me what the hell's happening. They don't have the bandwidth or the attention span to sit down for 10 hours or even 3 hours over 3 days to watch something and digest something.
Yeah. That one was done over 3 months at a venue. And the venue was ready to not, report it to the police. I mean, see, like I said, I don't want to get into it, but there's almost everything I've ever done. I've either been ripped off or it's been a struggle. And that one was done in a difficult situation at a theater in Gothenburg, and it was a grueling 3 months from March, April, and May. Little sections of it were done and then finally put together as one. So I actually really like the presentation personally, so it's okay, But yeah. I said, right, I'm not going to cram this information into 3 hours. There's no way. So, it has a beginning, middle, and end, like a lot of the work that I do. And I prefer that to this day. And had I been able to start from the beginning with that mode, I would have started from the beginning. But like you say, the sound bites and people's attention span demanded doing years and years and years of just podcasts, and often with people who are really not liking you and not liking your information, but they, whatever they need a guest or whatever, they've heard about you or whatever. But at least it wasn't the right format to do, these larger things. So that's all deliberate. That was all deliberate because there is so much to this information. I mean, that's a whole conversation. But I'm glad I did. I'm glad it had a beginning, middle, and end. Because don't you see, then when you're finished with that, you can move on then to the other thing. If you do it complete, there's a great moment of freedom at the end because you go, great, that's done. I don't have to say much more about it. Now I can go and tackle, right? The Irish origins, or female psychology, or whatever it is. I'm free now. I've put it behind me. It's on the shelf. It's there for posterity, and you can completely clean the slate. And now I say, right, new canvas, new painting. Wow, and new colors, and new brush, and new light to really tackle something brand new. It's the only way that keeps you going. If you had to do the same thing, there's people in this movement who 30 years later, they're saying the same thing. I don't want to name any names, but it's completely stuck record. I'd say the vast majority. Yeah. Well, I've never been like that. I didn't even want to do the same conference twice. I didn't want to do the same talk twice. And the people at the conferences were expecting me to get up on stage year after year and do the same thing, whether it was Atlantis or what it was. I had to twist their arm to say, can I please do something different next year? Oh, no, I don't think we can do that. No. But luckily, one man did allow me, and it took him nearly 6 to 9 months to decide. I finally get this phone call in Seattle here and saying, oh, yeah, remember you said you wanted to do something, on that, what was it? Subversive symbolism? He said, yeah. And he goes, okay. But the trouble was, it was like in 10, the conference was coming up in less than a month, and I'm like, got nothing prepared. So I had to just stay up day and night, right, to get this, because this is a great opportunity. This is but about one thing, but they called me so late that the presentation, I think, suffered from it wasn't as good as it could have been, because I'm just chucking things in and clipping things out. And in those days, PowerPoint, there wasn't enough images online, so it was a lot of photocopying and magazines and looking into my collection and having to go to storage, which wasn't in the same city, and dig out shit. So, and they're giving you record, and then you're just down there and you're wheeled up on stage. Go. Yeah, I made it through, but again, this is a common story where you're never given enough time to prepare the longer ones that have a deeper meaning, and there's always something left out, which is really sad. And you have to pick it up later on, do something later on. So the whole concept of Unslaved, everything I've done recently has been, again, to not have that happen. Mm-hmm. To try and get it in there as comprehensively as possible, so you can make the last statement, the last word, and then leave it for a good period of time while you delve into something unique and equally brilliant. This is a strategy. It's all done strategically and by necessity. It's like a war. It's like a sort of a war. The way I look at it is very, very battle strategy like, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely liberating to finish something in its entirety, and then be able to move on and leave it behind, not have it infiltrate your future thinking, research, etc. I completely agree. We mentioned earlier about finding like the 4 or 5 best minds on a subject, so to speak. But for someone new to this, how does someone develop that discernment to be drawn to the best of the best and not find themselves waylaid by all the rubbish that's out there on various subjects? Like, what's the
Yeah.
barometer for discernment, so to speak?
This is where it becomes your own intuition. This is where, because I'm a personalist and I'm always trying to talk about the true state of individualism, and it's, you guys know this anyway. And that's one of the features that not a lot of people are going to do it. The simple answer is that's where the sheep are separated from the goats. Obviously, you can train yourself. You can just look up on encyclopedia who's the expert, who are the philosophers, and then check them out. You can do that by trial and error, but there's also some little meter of intuition. And intuition is a very interesting thing in general. A lot of people mistake what it is. They think it's a mystical quality. It's not. When Jung divided the psyche into 4, and intuition is one of those parts. If you read his analysis of intuition, he says they're all up in Wall Street. It's a nice way to throw a bucket of water on people who think, "Oh, I'm an intuitive type," and they equate intuition with some, really like it's a special trait of a sage. No, Jung clearly says the most intuitive people in our society are over there on Wall Street. They're brokers and people like that, right? Therefore, what he's really trying to say is intuition is something of a very workaday, very valuable thing. If we say emotion, if we say intellect, and we say sensation, we have a clear understanding of what that means. But intuition gets a little foggy, but it shouldn't be. Intuition is the means by which that which you see in the world leads you to intuit there's something behind it. But everybody does that. Science does that, right? We are given, see, in order to prove another world, or to prove an underlying reality that may be behind the world, emotion isn't going to do that. Intellect plays a role, but doesn't necessarily have that as its top mandate. And certainly sensation is the furthest away. Sensation just accepts what's here in front of us. But intuition says, if I see this phenomena and I take it in a certain way, I maybe want to know where it came from or what's really behind it from the scene. That's why it's not mystical, or it's mystical with all caps. Intuition is not jumping over this world to find the reality. It's looking at this world. It's looking at what everybody sees and saying, there's something wrong here. Like psychology itself, types. You keep meeting these people, but your intuition says, I keep seeing similar traits in certain people. And then you get into typology. I think they're all of the same type. They look different, and that's intuition. Looking at millions of people, meeting lots of people, and then getting the theory, say, of typology, that there's something about, orientations and things like that. That would be an act of intuition. Now, the person who's developed their intuition will, to answer your question, have that ability, or those who are just born with a naturally strong intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, like back in the 80s, maybe just to say 83, 84, is when I first saw the movie Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And she actually scripted it and was part of the making of it and was right there on the sets. And the last speech in the film was at that time the longest speech ever recorded in film history.
Yep.
And it wasn't changed. She wouldn't allow one word to be changed of this final speech. So I wrote it down, kept it as a piece of paper, and used to walk around with this as a teenager, right? And read it. Okay, then when I got to the States after that 89 period, went to a bookstore, and to answer your question, he was filing through different books, and I saw this Ayn Rand book. I think it was, Who Needs Philosophy, or one of the others. Now, what told me to buy it? Actually, nothing except intuition. I'd heard the name, and somebody else had mentioned that she was also a novelist. But when I saw the thickness of Atlas Shrugged and the Fountainhead, I just went, no way, right? And I don't like fiction too much anyway, except, certain exceptions. But there's no way I was going to read a fictional story that thick. It's too much waste of my time, I thought. But when I saw her philosophy books that, could be read in much shorter time, those appealed to me. But when I was opening them, something had to, reading a few pieces, this is in Palo Alto, right? So you're reading a few paragraphs, okay. And then I go, oh, I have to have this. This is great, or maybe you go away and you come back and buy it or something, and then you buy more, Yeah, I would look back and say, it's something's resonating with you inside. But this is where intuition then, comes to play. Sorry for the long-winded explanation there, but intuition fascinates me, and I think the answer is intuition. Another one, of course, more simple than that, is that somebody else tells you. Like I do on email every day, and when people go, Michael, I'm into psychology. What should I start with? Or I'm into symbolism. Where should I start? So, if somebody who knows what they know can help you, that's obviously a more generic way. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the personal journey. That's why it's Siddhartha Road. You started asking me about hero's journey. Well, this is key to this. Maybe you go to find things, and maybe like an archaeologist, you dig up stuff and you find out things that nobody knows and nobody would ever tell you. It's a private journey. It's go down to the library, go down to the bookstore, browse. When I used to go to bookstores back in the 80s, early 80s, this is in Santa Clara, I would just go down there and just walk around. And if the spine of a book or the name of the book caught my eye, I'd read it. And this could be a memoir. This could be a history book. This could be some other sort of, sociology, or just some lore fiction, like that. I just browsed. And then when I got work in bookstores in the 80s, in the 90s, in the Bay Area, I did exactly the same thing. Stuff was coming on the bestseller tables. I got to know what a biography is. I looked around the Roman Empire. Oh, Napoleon. Oh, Camille Paglia, whatever. I just completely dived in there. And my intuition, and she's one of the great names as well, by the way. So intuition just guided me. And then intuition guides you to go, you pick up something and it looks good and everybody's buying it. And you go, nah, not for me. Trust that. Trust that.
Yeah. I like that you brought up Ayn Rand for sure, because Ayn Rand's obviously a huge proponent of reason and rationality. But in her own writings, she's obviously a critic of what we're referring to as intuition, so to speak, and I guess mysticism. Did you find any challenge when reading Rand in blending divination and intuition and that side of things with the strong sense of reason and rationality that she brings to the table?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we've done some podcasts diving into these contradictions. Her hatred of Immanuel Kant stood out.
Mm-hmm.
Her disinterest in psychology, even though her chief protege is a psychologist, Nathaniel Branden, is odd. But these are just her peccadillos. My answer to it was just blow her a kiss and say, you're welcome in anyway, love. You don't need to take your shoes off over here. We'll accept all your blemishes because of what you've given. Yeah. Because what you have given me is so immense that, if you eat with a knife and fork in the wrong way, I think we can forgive you there. If you put 16 sugars in your coffee, we'll handle all these peccadillos. But at the same time, I do a deep dive. See, I'm one of these people who in my life absolutely insist on these contradictions because they're really variations. And I want you to know both sides as part of the whole, as part of my life and as part of the message. Why didn't she like psychology? What's she got against Immanuel Kant? What has she got, against the collective, say, or this other one where mysticism, as she calls it, is out to lunch? Well, I found out why. And so, but she's a very unusual person, by the way. She's a lot of light and shade. So even though she didn't like religion and didn't like mysticism, the reasons for it are very sound, actually, because she has in her mind the bugbear of collectivism. And so the mysticism she's talking about would be that which you find in East, that which you find in religion, and that which you find in the New Age movement. But I think on a personal level, if you talk to her, she'd have a lot of time for psychology, and she'd have a lot of time for deep, as I would call it, mystical naturalism, something rooted in reason, something that, like intuition, as I've just described it, she would go for, because I said it's hard and practical. Mm-hmm. It's an absolutely natural thing that when you see a butterfly's wings, to wonder, about how that came about. Is nature a painter now all of a sudden? You see, so in the journey towards truth, you intuit. So let's just take it in a broad brush. Everything about speculation, including the discovery of the quantum universe, or Walter Russell's discoveries, or Bruce Lipton's discoveries about the photon, all of that comes from intuition. Mm-hmm. Because it starts with what you ordinarily see, what everybody else sees. But it's like one of those blue lights that sort of, like a luminol. The intuition is looking at everything as well and going, I wonder where that came from. I wonder if there's something behind that. I wonder what it does.
Yeah.
As I said, emotion is not going to, mostly we'd say intellect does that, but there's a little bit of a mistake there. Intellect is useful once you've entered into the journey of picking up a thing and go, what is that? Right? Well, how does that work? Curiosity, it's actually really wonder. Go back to Plato, the origins of philosophy are in astonishment and wonder. But all that is saying, what is that? And you go over to it, seawater. Why does it get salt in it? Water I know is good to the taste. Why does this one that I'd really love to swim in and drink, but it's all salty? That's horrible. Why? How did it get there? All the questions we have to ask. Is a bird cold-blooded or warm-blooded? No, and all the rest of it is born out of curiosity.
Yeah.
And intuition is working there. Then once you've opened that door, intellect comes in as the razor sharp goggles, and scalpel, by which we then go into the thing to facilitate our natural knowledge. Why is every snowflake different? But why? Why would it be different? Well, on all these questions that we have. So it's intuition first, which is what it means, intuiting that something, is at the foundation of what I see, and I want to know about it. And intellect is the means to know about it. So if you presented that as an Ayn Rand type, they go perfectly okay. We just don't want you losing yourself in that so that you can get away from reason. And she's perfectly right. Why would you want anything that takes you away? Right. But she was into inspiration. She was an artist. And she wrote the Romantic Manifesto, which is a book everybody should read, to show you the journey of an artist. How the world is taken in and then regurgitated back onto a canvas, into a piece of music, or into, anything, calligraphy or writing. There's a circular intake and outtake. Right. The world is very much involved in that, but so is mind. And so she would be very into passion, and she would be very into inspiration and into things that are not quantifiable. So again, it's light and shade. She appears more dogmatic than she actually is, on things. And actually, to tell you the truth, she actually said some things which I consider highly mystical. So, I give her a lot of elbow room that I would not give others.
Yeah. I like because I think from Nathaniel Brennan's perspective, his idea of reason is all the data that we receive from ourselves and from the world, including intuition, so to speak. So he almost includes intuition and reason, from what I've understood personally. But I can just speak for myself. Like, I think I started at the Truth Warrior podcast. David mentioned Unslaved. I came, listened to Unslaved, Sage and Psychopath, and your podcast on narcissism just blew me away. Then that led me to somatic intelligence, and I see Yerasimos, and I message Yerasimos, and now we're here. And it's almost like intuition is the guiding force of all that as well. So
Yeah.
But-
It's so misunderstood.
yeah,
We've got to look at it like a spade, a wrench. It's not this mystical thing. It's a very, very practical thing, and it happens all day long.
yeah,
If you did want to make your fishing nets better, if you didn't know how to weave your clothes for the winter better, right? All of this is facilitated by intellect, but you've actually started one step too late. Intellect is the workaday tool, but there's a tool before that even you notice it, you attract your attention to it.
Yeah.
Your attention is drawn to it. That's not intellect. That's intuition. And then of course it's bigger than that, because these guys on Wall Street that Jung says have it. Well, then it's speculation. It's the ability to have pattern recognition, to the law of tendency, which is if something goes along like this all the time through decades, through history, that's a law of tendency, same as is in a person's biological life. Right. So I can now predict what they're going to do down the road, not with 100% certainty, because there is no such thing, but the law of tendency. And so intuition is very much there. And then it works well with intellect that can check and balance it for you, And so, it's just another one of these extraordinary misinterpreted words, as is truth, one of the most misused words ever. It's like you guys say, you're here for the truth. And there can also be said, I'm here with the truth. Now, if I say to you, well, I'm here with the truth, isn't there something, a meter in us that goes, bullshit, right? Doubt that guy. So I can say, here for the truth. And it's perfectly acceptable, as it should be. If I say, I'm here with the truth, there's a certain repulsion, right, in our mind. Bullshit, good. So, but then again, let's look at it from another point of view. What happens if a man is exceptionally wise and actually does have the truth? He's in the same boat. He can't come to the world and say, I'm here with the truth. So look at that paradox. It's hypothetical, but nevertheless, it allows us to investigate the fact that there's something very peculiar about the truth. Because the moment somebody says they have it, I don't necessarily believe it. Well, wait a minute. That's kind of almost paradoxical. The man that comes to me and he says he's Jesus and he's got the truth, or Muhammad or whatever, I go, have you? Fucking hell, I'm following you. Now, we do know that people do that. So there's already a very strange paradox. What is it in us that doubts the man who says he's got the truth? So much so that only a nincompoop would ever come out and say that. I find that absolutely amazing that would be the case. But back to your point about reason, it's that when Rand uses it, it has a specific meaning, talking about the actual faculty of reason, but you're quite right. It is also used by them as a catch-all for all the different traits of us as the apex person in the food chain. We are the miracle. And so the traits that we have can be all summarized under reason, including emotional. It's just we're the rational animal. Depends where you're going to look for them, right? But generally speaking, we love to call ourselves the rational animal. So that's what she meant. She didn't just mean reason, like some left brain nutball.
Yeah,
she was including the body, and she was including faculties of art making, but she had dissected it. You see, so reason is a highly refined tool. And when you're reading her, she just focuses on reason, not necessarily the antecedent states before it. A little bit in the Romantic Manifesto, you get that because she goes into conceptuality and perception, which is tremendously valuable as well. So there is good stuff there below. But generally speaking, you have to turn to others, maybe like a Hegel or a Schelling, to talk about the antecedent stages that must have been there for reason to be the shining capstone on the top of this pyramid that's mostly shrouded in darkness. And it's not even really that much of interest today, even in philosophy, those antecedent stages. But again, that's a fascinating question, about that. But what came before reason? And how did reason even emerge at the top? And then what is its bad side and its good side? I'm sure Ayn Rand would have accepted that reason has some negative sides. And that would be when it's blunt. That's when it's in a society that hasn't taught children to be rational. So they're not, reason for her is the means by which we're in connection with reality or nature. We're learning all the time. Yeah, but a blunted reason that hasn't been honed by parents and honed by society sees the same world, but in this blunt or foggy way. And then she's going to say, that's not rational. The rational person is not only grateful and respectful to be a thinking being, but is also always articulated to what nature is doing, what reality is doing, which only a very small part of that you can see in the urban environment anyway. So this then opens up a lot of different studies, about reason and how nature instructed us to be rational. It's not just a man going, I'm going to be rational today. I woke up today. Where's my tank top and where's my weights? No, nature schools you. And the wise man responds to that schooling. He gets up and he goes, wow, you're my instructor. I'll make you my instructor for the rest of my life. So it's a very, very reciprocal thing, actually, the reason.
So would you say, like on the topic of intuition, that it sprouts from like the ground of curiosity? So you must have curiosity first and foremost to really connect to your intuition in a certain way. So for those individuals where the curiosity is maybe beaten out of them by parents or whatever, that their connection to intuition may be a little off.
Oh, it's dead in most people.
Yeah.
This is one of the great dangers. And see, the dangers that we have today can not be seen just as we analyze phenomenologically modern times. They have an etiology, a long history. All the traits, emotion, intellect, sensation even, and intuition are all grow through, they've all come to be as realities or psychic types through the great process of history. We needed it in the past. We needed, emotion got us something, sensation got us something, intuition got us something, and then it evolves phylogenetically over the years. So we have it as a sort of an accretion of the very movement of history. So when people come along and cut it off for any reason, we're doing great damage to our psyches, because the psyche is built out of the historical movement. And that's why I have history myself as such an important, I even call it the euphemism for truth. My contribution to what is truth is history. History and truth are synonymous, because every capacity you have to gain truth in the now had to be an accretion of a process. Jung's archetypes. Each archetype is not a mystical phenomena. It's say the anima, which is woman. It's all human beings' experience of woman, both good and bad, down through the millennia. That's all the archetype of the anima is. There's no mystical aspect to it, except for the fact that in our history, some men have had a mystical experience with women. Yeah, so that's included. But it's not a mystical thing. It's a very physical and real thing born out of experience in the hardest sense. But if you unpack it, then you get all of other stuff. You do get, because you get, the sublime. We look at, and in order to understand any archetype, think what that archetype relates to today and think about your relationship with it. So the animus is father. Well, you got fathers today. So everything that you experience with your father today is part of the archetype. That means I hate some of them and I love the others. I feel, protected by one and not protected by another. Right. All of the things you could say today about those stereotypes is just more magnified, more what's called reified in the archetype. So that means that some psychologists who speak too mystically of any kind of archetype, and there's plenty of these people who do, they're actually they're not really explaining it correctly. Right? The only reason there's a mystical aspect to the archetypes, what Jung called numinous, is a term he got from Rudolf Otto, the Christian thinker. Numinous, meaning full of light, is because it's so old. Ideas have come together like a constellation. It's like same in the constellation of the stars, right? If bright stars all get together, then it's like blinding. So the little bits of thought and the little bits of experience down through the millennia constellate. That's what an archetype is. It's individual ideas, like a hybrid creature, but you can't see that. They've all come together and then they give off this incredible energy. That's where libido, that's where your physical energy comes from. Right? Being the animus is literally vital energy. So it's a combination, it's a gestalt of all of this power put together, and the archetype then has this extraordinary power, so that you know it. That's why when the archetypes approach you in your life, if you're lucky to have that happen, well, that's a question. But when they enter into consciousness, you know it, because they're coming in like a battery. They're coming in like a numinous angelic being, or even a demonic being can also happen. But when they enter in, your life will change. That's why they call them numinous experiences or numinous dreams. And they're different than the other dreams I had. I tell you, this one was really powerful. Yeah, of course it's powerful, because something is entering into consciousness through the veil, and it carries so much charge with it that your conscious mind just reels, when the archetypes express themselves. But if you back engineer that, how did they become so powerful as these eidetic images in your mind, so to speak, is because they're accrued through the millennia, through the ages. Every single experience concretized in what we call the psyche. The psyche is, and they concretize because they're like experiences, right? Archetypes come together from ideas and experiences that are similar to one another and form literally Pygmalion-like out of here's the anima, there she stands, there's the animus. But that comes from every human being's experience of man and woman. Intuition, back to your point, is that all through the centuries, we've had moments where intuition worked for us when we needed it. Seeing around that corner, is there a dangerous animal? Can I trust that person? So intuition is one of these developments over time that became so important. It's one of the four types. Each of the four types couldn't be what they are without. So if you honed in on them, right, if you really went with a microscope, you'd find they're like millions and millions. It's like a fractal of everybody's experience. Everybody's experience is in your head. And intuition is one of those accretions, and you either use it or you don't, or you throw it out. And if you throw it out, watch what happens. And of course, you couldn't throw it out. In the Jung's system, you'd go mad, because now there's an imbalance. Instead of four which balance each other, one is gone, and the rest are, terribly, tweaked, like a ship that's keeling over. Well, actually, most people that you see right now, that's exactly what's happened, because intellect has taken hold. For centuries now, intellect has taken hold, and people's minds are off kilter. But we have institutions that only want you if you're, jumping through the hoops and have a high intellect and IQ. That's put our society is actually making it so that children who grow up, will be compensated for their intellects, and emotion plays no role, intuition plays no role, and even sensation. Oh, what will happen is they'll play a role, but it's a role subservient to the intellect. Intellect is dominant, and the others are, either supportive, and one will always be regressed, or what they call non-dominant. And that's where Jungian psychology comes in, because in the four, sorry to elaborate on this, but out of the four, one is aligned with the unconscious, because you can't have a dominant type like intellect without one being thrown to keep the balance deeper into the unconscious. And so in Jungian psychology, this one is called the repressed factor, or the deeply unconscious factor, is the one that they work on to move in, so that there's a perfect cross. You'll keep seeing his mandalas and his emphasis on the quaternity. Well, that's what he means. And when in therapy, they're trying to work on the one that, is repressed, and you don't even know it's repressed, and you don't want it normally to come into consciousness because it threatens the status quo, or you think that it does. So in Jungian psychology, this fourth and hidden archetype, or not an archetype, but a type, is the one that they'll seek for. So when you talk to them about your dreams and your likes and dislikes and behavior, the Jungian will go, so the intuition is the repressed one. There, we have to work on that. And that's meant to be then, bringing you to wholeness. But Jung based his system on ancient alchemy, because he didn't invent the quaternity. He studied this and saw that this fourfold, even in the Christian myth, the fourfold is very, very important. The Native American Indians had it, the Tibetans had it, all the great systems had it. So he just factored it in, that the psyche is fourfold. And because of society and because of other, pathologies, one will be repressed. Now, why I'm wasting time on this is because look at our society today. This also has a social bearing, because the Western world has lost its thread. It has, as you say, it has been, not integrating intuition and emotion. And so the intellect is way, way, way too dominant, and that'll be, bang, you'll hear this big bang one day, and it'll all be over, unless we do the homework.
Why do you think some people are more connected to their intuition? Like, do you think there's a divination? Like, there's like an old soul element? Like, why do you think a certain person, or someone who's like 15 or 20 or 25, just feels like they're more intuitive and their life takes a certain direction, and for someone else it doesn't? Like, what factors do you think play into it?
Yeah, this is interesting, because I grew up a very intuitive person in a bunch of lunatics who had didn't even know what it was all about. So, and it's not just being one of the types. It's how you're not overly one of the types. You don't want to be overly intuitive, because then you maybe are a bit too vague. You don't want to be too emotional, because then you're like some mother type of person who's gushing all. You don't want to be over intellectual, because that tends to go wrong as well. And you don't want to be over sensational, because they're fucking horrible people, right? But if you're balanced in any of these ways, you're very balanced. You're a good human being. You got it. But why somebody would be more over intuitive is probably either their good parenting has not forced them to see. The intuition needs a lot of time. It needs to be restful, and it needs a lot of time. It's the one that requires a lot of time to speak to you. So if you have a parenting that is rushing you off your feet, or they're very high maintenance, it doesn't mean that you can't be intuitive. You still could develop a very strong intuition, by the way. But generally speaking, that's going to be the one that suffers the most. Other than that, I don't know. It's hard to say. There is this, because we have another faculty in our minds, which is called the ego ideal. And the ego ideal is what identifies with heroes. So I think it's connected. My guess would be it's connected to this. And that is that when we look up, because all children do, whether they're helped by their parents or not. And actually, even if the parents turn out to be real flunkies, right? You're still going to like your Bruce Lees and your Zorros and your Robin Hoods, you know what I mean? And your Sherlock Holmeses. You'll still identify with the heroic. These Marvel comics, a lot of this stuff is, the people upstairs know about this and have made hay out of it. And it's right. It's right to have heroic figures. So then I think that because you are maybe identifying with somebody like that that has their own intuition or go by intuition. This would be very much the case with a kind of a Sherlock Holmesy type character who are always using their intuition. I think that might help. Who are you identifying with? Well, who you're identifying with is absolutely crucial, all caps, to your personality development. So I would include this there, because that's not a small thing. That is who you are. Your identifications, whether they're good or bad, is the total formation of your own character. And that's why it's so essential to have heroic, characters to look up to, with flaws, but at least, they come out. That's why the heroic character has more vices than everybody else, but he's conquered them, right? He works through them, and he suffers accordingly. All of these things are very important for children to grow up with. This pathetic, sanitized world in which, the children are just totally shielded from reality and from dirtiness and death. That's wrong.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes of all time by yourself: no human being who's in their sensor can be hypnotized. That's what needs to be remembered. No human being who's in their sensor, who's being guided, who's close to their intuition, who is a sharp critical apparatus, who's got a sharp sense of judgment, can ever be manipulated. And that's just something that's stuck with me ever since I've read it. So absolutely potent.
It's true too, because they've actually found out technically, psychologists have, that you can't hypnotize introverts. The extrovert goes down in a second. Well, what do you make of that then? Right? Shit.
Yeah. What I want to ask.
No, you go next. You go.
So early on, obviously, you've mentioned your grandfather was a figure in the New Age movement and you were brought up around it, so to speak. But in terms of intuition, what were the early hits that you got where you were like, something's deeply wrong here, something's flawed here in terms of that?
Oh, I had to use it every day, and almost every second of every day. I couldn't have survived life without intuition. So, but that's a rare and exceptional state of being that is it's abnormal, so don't quote me on any of that. I have to just talk in general of its positives, but my personal case, it was a survival mechanism, a coping mechanism.
So many, I feel like these days, more and more people, and I live in the hotbed of it in Los Angeles, of like pseudo spirituality, the New Age movement. Like, can you talk a little? I know you've written articles about it. I know you have multiple podcasts on it. But can you talk about the issues that you have with the New Age community and the challenges around it for a person who wants to individuate, or a person who wants to truly experience something more real?
Yeah, see, it contains things that are real. It's part of its temptation. Like all things that are purely evil, they have to window dress with things that are actually quite profound. So, and they're very good at doing that. They're very good at scavenging from the Rands or whoever, scavenging from what I refer to as the Western mystical tradition. There's a lot of scavenging goes on, and then they window dress it. So I became very aware of this. See, some of my family members are from the Krishnamurti tradition, and not that they ever honored one word that the man ever said, but I did. I read his books thoroughly. Actually, read them through my life, reading them assiduously when I couldn't understand one word. See, almost every book of meaning that I've ever read, I didn't. For the most part of my reading it, it was just words on a page. And it's only through this capacity of intense persistence that I ever fucking panned for gold and fun. Very slow, very, very slow learner. But all of these people that surrounded me, you could just basically see that it was window dressing. But it might have been hard in the beginning because, again, you're young. I'm talking about when I was like, about 13, 14, 15, when I met my grandfather and was part of his ashram down there, not far from Wilshire Boulevard, right? And it was a jam-packed. So although I like some of this, I like the communal aspects was one thing I liked. Every Monday he'd do a lecture in this beautiful adobe building, right? The house that they had there. And loads of people from LA would come of all different descriptions, police people, they have a gun in their, purses and things like that. It's fucking brilliant, and you're a young lad in America, and you're smelling these orange groves and all these hippies and bikers and straight up and downers and characters. One lady was an FBI officer, who knew all about the mafia. She worked in in the casinos of Vegas. Fuck's sake, there was so much to be fascinated with these individual people. Some had been high class secretaries in New York, So I was surrounded by colorful people. Some of them very colorful, and this social aspect attracted me enormously. But that's different than having that's a value. And then, but then respect is different, And so, and also the intellectual downloads. My grandfather was, in his own way, a very brilliant man when it came to being this raconteur, and so was Paul Solomon. But see, I like Paul Solomon not because of what he was teaching. I liked him. You're talking about intuition, right? I like the man. I would love to have hanged out with him if he had been a street cleaner. In fact, he said he had once worked in porno shops and stuff like that. I fucking love that, right? So it's like, here's a real ordinary guy. And then after he gave these extremely spiritual lectures or a thing, he goes, okay, let's go. We've rented the restaurant. And at fucking 11 o'clock at night, he'd have everybody just pour into, a restaurant in town long after they closed, and he'd rented it, and we could all just have a fantastic feast. That's the kind of guy I like. He's grounded in the earth, as well as, the esoteric, so to speak. So I liked him as a person. I liked Sir George Trevelyan, another great sage, as a person, despite what they were teaching. And so there was this little fissure that I didn't just worship you because, you wore a shawl, an Indian shawl, and, you waxed lyrical and all of that. Being from Ireland maybe is that aspect that I like, that groundedness. And he was just a warmer character. My grandfather's fucking evil, a total fucking charlatan, a cold-blooded bastard. And then it moved from there. And as I said, you try to salvage what's good from it, and there is a certain amount. But I don't know what it was. All I can say is that everybody else I met, and these are thousands of people, I find them all to be completely false. And this is in California. That's just completely subjective. So when I look back, I can't see anyone that I considered a true person. And some of these people were known to us for a long, long period of time, over many decades in some cases. And never once did I ever feel that they were good people. And so even though their bookshelves are loaded with all the latest fucking, Dwayne Dwyer and Eckhart Tolle and whatever the fucking else it was, I myself, totally personally, didn't go for it. So I start reading Lao Tzu. I start reading more of Krishnamurti. I would read, various other books that they had on display there, and I found that to be much more true. And all the guru worship and what have you, I found to be fake. And of course, later on, I was able to prove it because remember, there's a lot of quasi-Gnosticism, if not wholesale Gnosticism in these movements of the New Age. There's a great denial of the body, the somatic thing you were mentioning earlier. Apart from a bit of lip service, it's very aesthetic. All of these people sat in meditation. In fact, my grandfather had a meditation room, and people could just walk in there. His group could just come over for a few hours and sit there in solitude and stuff like that. Not a bad thing altogether, but the premise is this Eastern asceticism in which you're sort of removing yourself from the world. Your goal is outside the planet, outside the cosmos, outside this reality. And somehow, just purely intuitively, although I studied it immensely and was part of certain paths, it never sat right with me. And then I proved it because I read, as you say, the great masters. I went and read the refuters of this. And that fucking knocked my head back into sanity. Went, oh my God. It's like, it's like fucking Lord Theoden waking up from all the worm tonguing, right? It's like one of those moments, and then you're crystal fucking clear. And that's a very, very powerful thing. And the New Age movement, for the most part, I warn against it. Or at least if you tread into it, you have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I can only speak for myself. Initially, I consider my first kind of major shift in consciousness, whatever you want to call it, occurred around 2015. Then I read Eckhart Tolle initially and Power of Now and stuff like that, and I was just totally blissed out. I was able to let everything go, drop the past, drop the future, just enjoyed everything, every momentary experience. And this worked for me for a long time. I found so much joy in just emptying the dishwasher or taking the garbage out and things of that nature. But I mean, ultimately, I cast a shadow as long as you can possibly imagine in that process. I found it deeply affected my ability to reason as well. Because how can you drop the past and drop the future and still consider yourself a rational being when you're not using that material to think and to digress and to discern and to navigate your life? It's so, from my personal experience, it's 100% a very slippery road.
Yeah. And this, you see, don't forget that it is actually important to do that
Yeah,
as well, right? How can I know falsity unless I know truth? And how can I know truth unless there's the counterpoint of falsity? So when you go through these rites of passage in your life, from what you're describing, it can actually be one of the most productive times, because finding the truth is finding first what you don't want.
yeah,
It's deconstructive, as you know. It's all about removing the illusion. So when you see yourself back then doing that, like I see myself back there in the middle of that nonsense, right, and all the fakes, uh, it is one of the most valuable things to steer you right. It's a coordinate. At the
well,
very least, it's a
yeah.
coordinate that will hold you true to the rest of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very orienting. It helps you to orient and ground now, because you have that GPS, so to speak, of where's out of bounds, almost. You know what I mean? Yeah,
The falsity
yeah,
is the most extraordinary thing. You know, William Blake, the English poet, said, "The fool who persists in his folly becomes wise."
yeah.
Very, 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 very interesting. And given that the whole process of looking for the truth is a process and it's deconstructive, then it makes perfect sense. But not everybody knows that. So they're liable to beat themselves up for that period that you're describing, you know, where you just let it all go. And I want to, you know, we are brought up to be body hating. And so whole cultures have turned against that. That's what the almost positive part of the 60s was about, being sensational. You know, was it Philip Larkin wrote a great poem about the difference between the new kids in the 60s who could have sex anywhere, and, you know, it became permissible, and his generation, which, you know, you couldn't even kiss a girl. Everything was so rigid, and no touching, no physical touching without a chaperone, and all of this. So we've gone through certain periods where, you know, then it's expected in the Hegelian way that the opposite will manifest from what was before. The status quo before, of the 1940s and 50s and whatever, with this completely repressive attitude and almost distaste for sex and the body and nature and enjoyment. And in an individual life, like you just described, can be the same thing as well. I guarantee you probably did you come up with fairly repressive parents, or?
Yeah, well, I was raised as Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, for fuck's sake,
So
no way.
yeah, there you go.
There you go then. Right. So that was a phase in your life that was actually incredibly instructive, I would say, to you. And did you know wrong ultimately? You know, so
Yeah,
it's, again, there's things can be seen from various perspectives, actually.
yeah. I find you bounce between the opposites, then the gap becomes refined as you continue down the process.
Mhm.
It's extraordinary to actually contemplate in that way, for sure.
Yeah, when I first got into like health studies, like I remember I was like the health police. I was just like, you can't eat. What are you doing? Why are you having the Red Bull? Why are you doing this? Like this is gonna. But then I feel like I came back to a much more grounded, centered place. But I had to
Right.
go through that process. You
The
know,
pendulum swings, doesn't it?
yeah, like you go from one to the other, and then it's like, all right, you kind of can stand in between the tension of opposites and have a little bit more balanced of understanding, you know. And that was kind of my foundational really work was psychological, psychospiritual work of understanding the compensatory nature of the psyche, and how if you over identify with one way of being, on the other side that's hiding in the shadows is another equal and opposite part of you. And so how can you honor and embrace that part of you and integrate it? You don't need to become it, but just know that it's there. And that's has supported me throughout my journey, and has also helped me, I guess you could say intuitively, like really get a sense of when people were like spiritually bypassing, you know, like it's a huge term where it's just like people are just like horrible things are happening. And it's like, well, you know, this is meant to be, and this is, um, it's all part of my journey. Meanwhile, like it's okay to go through the fucking emotions of having a horrific experience. You know what I mean? So I just feel like there's this thing with individuals where they don't want to. I've heard you speak about it. I don't know where you got it from, but this idea of legitimate suffering, what people don't, they won't experience these natural emotions around events that happen in their life because what they're not, that'll show to others that they're not super evolved or super enlightened because they're sad or they're anxious or or they're upset with something. And I find that a lot when I meet some people, and it's just like everything has to be positive all the time. Everything's
Oh,
positive. It's ridiculous.
yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, I forgot to mention that these sun worshippers, children of the sun, out there, this is what I discovered, that's what they're doing. They're actually not working spiritually at all, the New Agers and other people like that. In fact, I'd say this of even most religious types. They have created a pseudo self or a pseudo path and a pseudo world in order to prevent them actually dealing with the real facts. And this is multiple. This also includes the body armoring, the emotional plague, the matrophobia. In the case of women, it may mean also that they are wanting to live in that one season world,
Mhm.
as you say, and but then to self-deceive that they're doing something valid, they just sign on for one of these archaic paths like Buddhism or whatever. Right? They're signing on for that because it's great window dressing, but it's based in self-delusion. Now, then somebody would say, well, who the hell are you to come in and tell me that person isn't legitimate? So it's all subjective. I stood back and watched these people, and I'm telling you that I found them to be cruel, false, and hypocritical.
Yeah.
So I can't convince you of that, but I was convinced, and I proved it to myself, and therefore then I acted upon that. But it's not that I didn't know great people too. But every time I met a great person, and I had these people, I had them as mentors. I mentioned two names, and there's been others. These people were like fucking Dorito eaters and loved to head down to Chuck E. Cheese's. They were the most normal. They had no airs on it. They were the most spiritual people I've ever fucking met. I mean, one guy had a garden in his car,
Hmm.
like mud and plants. And he was the fucking wisest man I've ever met. So I met the motherfucker. Right. Oh, I seen the Cadillacs. Yeah. You don't know how many ashrams I was involved in. All right. And the little guy with a garden in his car, this old junker. Don't
Yeah.
even think about it. Don't even think about the light in that man's being.
Yeah.
All right. And he owned nothing. He lived in a fucking hut in the woods. That's what I'm talking about. And I met them in Ireland. I met them on buses.
Yeah.
Not in California, mate. Not in the fucking New Age movement. No, nada. So yeah, it is a mystery how one would work that out.
Why?
And you risk being ostracized when you do. So it's quite a thing as well. It's not just a passive thing. You will be ostracized. You will be condemned if you point it out, or you don't quite fit in and all of that.
Why do you think so many Westerners are magnetized to this movement and to
Oh,
simplified Eastern mysticism as well?
well, it crept in through the Gnostic cult. It's all intentional to undermine the West. It's part of a very old strategy. And you can study the individual characters like Nicholas Roerish or Vivekananda. That's quite interesting too. But yeah, as you say, it was a plan from day one, and it's a plan to undermine the West. And I talk about this cult in two premiums I've done on Gnosticism. Very, very, very great study, long study, not only into the principles of Gnosticism, but then how it mobilized itself and disguised itself. Right? Nazis, for instance, are Gnostics. Buddhists, Hindus, there's a lot that goes into this, and many of the cults. So to find a non-Gnostic religion, there are such ones, and they're hard to find. The rest is a sweeping movement. And then why it appealed to the Western mind is because they were never introduced equally so to the Western mystical tradition, which is a very deep and rich tradition, and they were never exposed to it. Consciously or unconsciously, teachers in the West, teachers, right? They never taught us it. They never exposed us to it. And therefore, it just has been junked. And then in that abscess, once that abscess is there, it needs to be filled. And that's when these super wealthy Gnostics, the Gnostic cult, took full advantage of that and started, working behind people like Alice Bailey and a bunch of other kooky people, to bring in the spiritualist movement in England. And it just goes on and on. It's a huge subject, but the long and short of it is we've been colonized And our fault is because we never really understood the preciousness of the Western magical tradition or Western mystical tradition.
What would be, just even taking that topic based on what you said earlier, like 4 or 5 of the greatest minds to speak on that subject? What are there people that you would recommend for any of our listeners that maybe have, been hypnotized by the New Age movement and are working themselves out of it and want to dial in and tap into the Western mystical tradition?
Well, that's hard because the ones I would recommend are so highbrow that that's not a good place to start. But you can start with people like Colin Wilson, the writer.
Mm.
He wrote a book called Beyond the Outsider, and then another one called The Outsider. I would start there. Um, Mikhail Naimi, who wrote the Book of Mirdad. I would refer people to that. I would refer people to Khalil Gibran. Oh my God, C.S. Lewis, a Christian thinker. Um, oh, there are Ayn Rand, top of the list, of course. I have to always mention that. Ayn Rand would be beautiful for people to just clear the cobwebs away. But I have a very large recommendation list in which you wouldn't first think that, well, what the fuck I want to read that guy for, but it's quite a journey. You see, it's not just and again, if you're coming from the mystical naturalistic point of view, then you definitely want to read, your Wordsworths, your Emersons, your Henry David Thoreau, your Walt Whitman, and that kind of poetry. Yeah, there's a lot of recommendations to dive deeply into in people's work, but those are the ones off the top of my head. Now, the other ones are more deeply philosophical, just put you off unless you have, a lot of experience getting into those people. Like William Blake and Jacob Boehm and all of that. But Meister Eckhart, Hegel, Schelling, there's a whole bevy of those people. But I tend to want to break their work down. That's why the Unslaved was really start, and I've got more work to do on that. There's some really good series coming up, by the way. But that's a little technical and difficult, especially because remember I just said it's been hinterlanded and misinterpreted like you can't even believe. So when people come to it, they might be reading some oik or some plonker or some flunky who wrote the book on it. Do you know how much lies have been told about Hegel alone? Almost everything is wrong. What was that, book by, what was his name? Everything is wrong. Yeah, well, this is what happens there, So whether it's Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, whoever, these people, a lot of junk has been written.
Mm-hmm.
But then, that's what my podcasts are for. We've done beautiful stuff on Kierkegaard and all sorts of really good stuff there. And we just did another one on non-dualism. Just this week, we did one called Mystical Naturalism and the Case Against Non-Dualism, part 2 of a thing on non-dualism, because that's another pestilence that's being created by. That was funded and created by the Gnostic movement. See, our world. That's what that would be my biggest no for the New Age movement. You asked about that. It's Gnosticism, and it's quasi-Gnosticism, and it's funded by Gnostics, and they flooded America with these spiritual guru types. They're not spiritual, right? They're just auto-hypnotized freaks. But we all fell for it because we didn't have that. We're not nurtured by our own Western magical tradition, mystical tradition. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't study all of those things. I did myself. So I'm not saying, put a cross on the front door and keep that away. It is a study. You must know your opposition. You must know the enemy. You must know what they're doing. What are the techniques of auto-hypnotism? The techniques of, supernaturalism, for God's sake. And then, you move from that point on.
Yeah. For those that are listening that probably haven't been introduced to Gnosticism or the Gnostic cult in the way that you're mentioning, I know it might be difficult to simplify, but how could you explain that as the underpinning of the New Age movement?
Well, there's 2 premiums on the whole thing going right the way through it so that people can identify the theology of it, the ideology of it. See, it has certain secret ingredients, right? If you're doing a blind test, somebody puts a blind and gives you a piece of cake, and you go, what is that flavor? You go, I think that's that cinnamon. No, it's my favorite. Or cherry. So they've secreted homeopathically within the New Age movement certain flavors that are very appealing to us, and for the right reason.
Yeah.
These are the top intellects. These are archonic. I mean, you wouldn't believe what's behind this fucking shit. To me, it's the most evil shit. But they know the ingredients. They know your psyche better than you know it yourself. And so they've put lots of nice little flavors in there, which burst onto the tongue for a newbie. I went down to the Gnostic centers in Bay Area. This is fucking awesome. Oh, this is good. White robes, ethereal women, chalices, goddess theories, and fucking, you're there, mate. That's it. You're coming to the back streets of fucking Belfast. Blech, hook, fish, done. It's window dressing. You have to be so, what's the fucking word? You have to be so skeptical and horrible. You've got to be the horror on the block. Remember in human design, didn't you mention one type that like pushes everybody away and is automatically hated? That's me. Whatever fucking type it is, that's it. And you have to be that, right? But then you taste these things and goes, yeah, but wait a minute. And then you basically, what I did was take it apart. You just take it apart and find out where all these threads lead. And so they lead to a group that has taken elements of different religious ideas that never would have been exposed or anything, but they put it together in the most extraordinary cocktail. And it's spiked. It's just one of these cocktails where you go, is this banana? Is that coconut? Oh yeah, I fucking love that. Right? And down it goes. So it's a pina colada from hell. It's just unbelievable what they've done. And it's got cherries on it, right? So this thing is like the most gorgeous sundae that any insane person could produce. You know what I mean? It's just unbelievable. And there's that big fucking satanic grin behind it. But they're also in Christianity. What we're talking about is also in aspects of Judaism, and the whole story of it is actually incredible when we get into it. And I'm doing programs on it. But the New Age movement and its champions have used this woo-woo, have used and they've used some very positive things as well to overwrite psychology, to overwrite the Western magical tradition. And it is a study of how they've done it. And a lot of good people get caught up in it. Must tell you, I didn't meet too many good people in it, but they're obviously, outside my experience, obviously it's seductive. And that has to do with the bankruptcy of our Western tradition, but wasn't bankrupt originally. But when was the last time you ever taught by anybody about the Bach saga? Or Odinism, or Osatru, or German Romanticism, or German idealism, or the earlier German mystics, or the English equivalent. See, what we call logical positivism under Bertrand Russell, what we call pragmatism in America is a bit of a odd one. It's got some very, very positive aspects, but more of this deconstructionism and other materialist atheistic beliefs that came into American science and psychology, that swept that all aside. It literally boulderized it and bulldozed it. And pluralism and multiculturalism and feminism. We get that in place of what was. So when you erect something, anything, right? Think of making a house of cards or a sandcastle on the beach. If I build an edifice, I can say to the world, this here is to replace what's lost. And everybody goes, to replace what we lost? Brilliant. But the cynic, as I said, he turns around and goes, but now that it's there, the other thing could never be. It's in the place of the thing. I'll go, shut up, you. Didn't he say it was just a wonderful, replacement for the thing that we've lost and don't remember? And I go, yeah, but now that it's there, the other thing couldn't come back if it did. It's in the fucking place of the. We don't care about that. So that's what's happened. The things that are now installed, all the things I just mentioned, are in the way of the original. It can't get in. Yeah. It's like, imagine there's been stories of a famous band, and one of the lead singer couldn't get into the venue because he didn't have a ticket. I'm in the band. Oh, sure, mate. Away you go. That's the real thing. Can't get in the fucking venue anymore. So my work, tragic as it is to try and, because I love it. It's like I said, these were hobbies that then became something else, right? Don't ask me how. But then to me, I want to dig back. My way of eating away at that falsity, of kicking it over, is to just gruel it out and try to bring back the tenets, the basic ones, by the way, of this tradition, be they in the mystery school, be they in the podcasts, or writings, as you said, things like that.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm such a fan of your work and Unslaved, and I literally like scream it from the rooftops from anyone that I come across, is because your ability to synthesize a lot of material and some of this maybe highbrow stuff that most people aren't going to read that you've read and able to kind of just get the nuggets from and then connect it to someone else from a different time period and this person and deliver it in a way that it's accessible. It's very
Yeah,
accessible. I wouldn't say I watch an episode, I'm like, I can't understand 90% of the things that are coming out of Michael's mouth. You know what I mean? So like
yeah,
it's
good.
amazing.
Yeah, that's the skill of it, or the effort to do that. To stop the obfuscation and the obscurity. Because I am a big personal believer that anything that is esoteric can be explained in simple language. This is why I referred people to Khalil Gibran or Mikhail Naimi, people like I just recommended, C.S. Lewis, the Screw Tape Letters. There's a whole bunch of people, Ayn Rand. I really have learned to do that in my life, to clear up the mess of it and not too many digressions, and to make it also very interesting for people, I think is very, very vital. But yeah, the situation in the world today, I don't believe in a great awakening, like a lot of people do. I believe in it, that people have been shaken up, but that's a world away from being wakened up.
Mhm.
That still has to come. Yeah, people are, attendance records in churches right now is out the door. So it's back into the rut. It's replacing one dogma with another.
Yeah. And I find that too, especially in like the truth movement. There are a lot of people who have left the womb of the new age world and have just jumped into the womb of the Christian world, the Jesus world.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. And those things are a study, like I study Christianity all the time, things like that. I've got websites on it. But again, you're quite right. What's the point of getting disenchanted with your postmodernism, or you see the flaws in a particular thing like critical theory, and then just regressing? And there's even people in this movement are advocating it right now as we speak. There's people who should know better. They themselves have capitulated to that. And again, that's a symptom of thinking, well, there's nowhere else to go. Well, there is. It's called the Western mystical tradition. So this is a real problem, because vast majority of people in this movement are not in the least bit interested in authentic psychology, except for which a lip service, and they certainly couldn't care less about the Western mystical tradition. They don't even know what that is.
Yeah. Do you think, like, on a political level, like extreme right wing fundamentalism could be waiting in the wings, so to speak,
Yes,
considering everything that we're experiencing?
yes, definitely. It has been waiting in the wings a long time, and I go back and forth because I'm quite a conservative person. So part of me goes, "Fucking can't wait, great, get it back." I don't mean Christianity; I just mean traditional values and all of that. The other liberal part of me goes, another way. But what you're addressing is a worry. Yeah, if this thing came back because a leader jumped up who started to again awaken that atavistic. This is the danger. They use a psychology of their own to awaken the radical right. That's not a good thing. Now, we don't really even have a right wing in this country, in America. So that has to be factored in as well. That has been excised long, long ago in a very deft and clever way. So that there isn't really a right wing, but you're quite right. The fundamentalistic airheads are just waiting their chance for the deep. See, these sides need each other so badly. They couldn't exist without each other. So the other side sits there. They're very wealthy. They're billionaires, and they sit there waiting. They're descendants of the old Pilgrim Fathers and the Puritans. This is one of the foulest institutions, and I shake that might come to pass. But just in general, speaking speculatively, see, look at all the rivalries that are awakening again in the world, no matter what it is, left, right, Christian, non-Christian, Muslim, whatever, Jew or whatever. See, the thing to grasp about of all of this is each enemy says, brother, stay near me.
Mm.
Brother, enemy, I need you more than anything else. Because psychologically, when there's insecurity in a person or a nation or a thing, that means my identity is weak. Well, what better strengthens your sense of identity, your weak, fucking impotent sense of identity, than an enemy at the gates? Take the Jews. Here's a group of people who were under captivity. Well, small c, some of them were just guests. But yeah, they had the Assyrians, for instance, the Babylonians, Egyptians, the Persians, all come in and basically house arrest them all. What did that do? People say, the Jews, they have this big identity. They work together. They're so close. They're inbred. They only think of themselves. Yeah. They ever studied their history? They are that way because they were under threat from external enemies at the gates. So take that metaphor and apply it now to the left and the right or anyone else. The weaker your sense of identity is, the more you need the enemy. Well, then the next question is, so we'll never be free of an enemy, Michael. Right. Because the enemy is necessary for your sense of identity. So people want truth and enlightenment? Fucking smoke that in your pipe. You tell me when it'll end. Shelley said, the great poet, when all men are wise and good, government of itself will decay.
Long way
Then
away.
my question, and the question then is, how do you make man wise and good? Because that's the missing part. If he's right, and I believe he was, then how do you get wise and how do you get good? Question mark. Right. Without psychology, first of all, that's what my platform is always about. Well, without psychology, that's null and void. That's just a nice poetic statement. And then, from there, one goes to investigate what on earth he meant. Government of itself will decay when all men are wise and good. He's told you. He's given you your mandate. And yet, well, who cares? We want a conflict. I need my enemy close to me. Because why? Because your fucking self, your identity is so weak. So when you talk about the right wing, left wing, look, I'm quite right wing, but I'm also a person who understands that any of these groups on a more of a national scale, if you keep needing an enemy to be what you are, I don't want to join you. I don't want to be part of you. I don't want to be left or right. If I know that the reason why you're in constant conflict and at each other's throats is over something so tawdry and empty. There's an old Star Trek, I don't know if you've seen it from the original series, where it's about two guys from a planet that turn up and they're in constant conflict, right? And the Star Trek Enterprise has to handle these two lunatics. It beams them both on board. And it turns out at the end of the show that the reason why their cultures, the planets have been totally destroyed, their planet has been totally destroyed, and all their race wiped out except these two guys who've been hunting each other through the galaxy for millennia. And it turns out that the only reason they've been doing this is that they have this, their facial features is black on one side, white on the other. They're this strange race that is completely black, pitch black on the one side of the face and white on the other. And it turns out at the end, Gene Roddenberry, the reason they're fighting is because he's black on this side and the other guy's black on that side. And white, they're mirror opposites. Yeah. And that's enough for them to have destroyed a civilization of millions of people. Because you're white on the one side and I'm white on the other side. That is what I'm talking about. When your sense of identity on a psychological level is so weak that you can't live without an enemy. The Jews owe their identity as a people to the constant conflict, whether it's Egyptians or whoever. And that is the same with everybody else. Everybody else. So smoke that in your pipe. Find out then what is real individualism, where I don't need any other to know what I believe and what I stand for. We're not there yet. We're in kindergarten. At that level of development.
No masters above, no slaves below.
Well, let's try it. Because in the sadomasochistic world we find ourselves, we want the masters, which is the enemy, and we don't mind even being, sadomasochistically the slave. See, that's why psychology is needed. You can't free a group who doesn't want to be freed. Right? The whole of the Stalinist era was voted in. Vast majority of people supported communism. And even after the Soviet Union fell, people in the majority still didn't like the new Russian experiment. They wanted, Stalin wins the Best Man of the Year award to today in Russia. China is clearly draconian and communist today. They've never even looked like they're going to become a liberal democracy. People love tyranny. But the man whose identity is either gaseous or jelly-like likes it even more. And we've got it in the West. So words like freedom, words like truth, they've always been just merely talismanic. They're the most abused terms, and they really don't mean anything. Man does not want truth. And the wisest men of all know that. The first step on the rung of the ladder of wisdom is to know that. The vast majority are not going to go through any great awakening, and they are not interested in truth.
I think we need to change the name of our podcast.
No, there are exceptions.
Yeah, I'll just play it.
And you're having a great many of them on. Not all, but all of our podcasts have disinformationalists and plonkers. Yeah. But we also if you see, it's all about your intention. And you guys know, as I do, that it is the search for the untrue that really opens the gate. That's the master key. Once I have discovered what is impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Or it is only by the painstaking discovery of what is untrue that the true stands forth. And it's painstaking. And that's why most people, one of the reasons they don't want to do it. It is painstaking. It requires your reason. Well, the TV and the media have dulled that to the point of obscenity. You probably don't care about it. The schooling and education that you experienced was so dreadful that you don't want anything to do with it anymore. And kicking back and watching, TV or whatever, is preferred. And hey, the ultimate truth is freedom. So you must step back and allow people to be unfree. To be free enough to abuse freedom. See, here's another one of the things we're talking about, one of the great paradoxes. If freedom is the ground of all, and their freedom is also the it is by way of freedom that all evil comes into the world. Remember we talked about evil needing, the opposites needing each other. Every act of evil celebrates good. Every act of evil celebrates the sovereignty of good, because the real good is the freedom by which I can flaunt all moral rules. We've got a moral universe. People say there's a God. Only a good God could make you free enough to flaunt all his rules, to speak in Christian language. Now follow this. Some people have made this a proof of God in the philosophical sense. If only a good God, only a spirit that is goodly in its core could ever bestow us the foundational freedom to do evil, to flaunt truth, to murder mankind, right? To do anything that is immoral. You're free to do it. So freedom then is what we need to build our altars to. But it's a very strange phenomenon we don't understand very correctly. So that means that every evil that is done actually points to the greatest good that there is, which is freedom. And just because freedom is constantly misused by other people doesn't change this essential philosophical fact. But where are the altars to freedom? You see, so the good and the evil are when these non-dualists and these other people say, there's no such phenomena. You want to bet? As long as you're free, there will always be good and evil. But ultimately, it's a positive story, because it means then that only a goodly God, right, so to speak, would ever rule the cosmos to give people the freedom to flaunt every one of the edicts of that force. And people really need to contemplate that. And then every time they see evil in the world, to understand it aright. There's something very extraordinary about goodness and truth, and we haven't studied it. These are tenets of the Western mystical tradition that have not been shared. If every child was brought up to understand this point that Immanuel Kant and Schelling, and others worked on, if every child was instructed upon this, what do you think would be their view of reality and the cosmos? You can take all that biblical shit and throw it away. There's only one Christian edict that you need, and that's this.
Yeah.
And you'd have it. It would transform a person. It would transform their view of their own actions morally and the actions of the world. They'd have a new and true perspective of why chaos and evil is taking place in the world. It is an affirmation of freedom, which itself is an affirmation of a good God. And even if you don't believe in a supernatural God, then make freedom your God. You're already good to go. Come on, society. Let's try that one for size. What, you still want Boris Johnson? And you want Obama? And you want Putin? Is that where you're at? You want this Xi Jinping over in fucking China? That's what you want? You want fucking in line? And then you want, that doesn't look like freedom to me, mate. Maybe you don't want it. Why? Because there's something in it that is so deep. It's an affirmation of, right, of something so immense that you can't handle it. It's too big for you to insert into your fucking bird box mind. But as I say, the real reason is because I think people would take to this. This is my conclusion. But they don't take to it because it simply hasn't been articulated by our educators. Yeah.
What is God to you?
Well, that's immense. And I would say, I'm not a religious person, so I don't believe in a God in any sense of in the religious terminology. Uh, but at the same time, I'm a mystical naturalist. So for me, nature is the go-to answer that question. I'm also a personalist, but we won't get into that today. The mystical naturalist is saying that they see it's according to principles of existential psychology, Umwelt, the German word for nature, is the mirror of the soul, the mirror of your true core being that gets covered up in all this stuff. Society, Mitwelt, is the mirror of the ego. So the person who spends too much time in the urban environment, and I'm saying, it's nothing wrong with being social and being part of a society, but if it's exclusive and you don't factor in the Umwelt, then the being that you are is entirely ego-based. And selfhood need not apply. So when you spend more time in nature, and the whole question of how you do so, I don't mean bungee jumping and surfing and all that nonsense. It's not in a recreational sense, but in a truly deep spiritual vocational sense. That's why Krishnamurti is so valuable. This is Jiddu Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti, to distinguish him from others. So, and your Henry David Thoreaus and your Walt Whitmans, the people I mentioned, Emerson, that's why they're so valuable, because they turning to nature, and that there is then a mirroring of the true self. So to me, it's a kind of a quasi pantheism, so to speak. Although again, outside its religious meaning, because as you know, pantheism is about God created everything and then plunged into the world and is here. It's called immanentism, right? That's where I differ. There's no supernatural God in my life, right? It's almost like saying, how did we explain it last time? The creation is not actually a creation. It wasn't created. It is creative. Is that clear? It's like the universe itself, the creation is creative in and of itself.
Yeah.
Any supernatural explanation of how it got created is what I call mysteria, absolutely ridiculous falsity. So, and even pantheism, that's why I'm not quite a pantheist, because that still says an external God in a supernatural place came in and created the world. That's not what I understand. God is in our world, all right, but we created it as an explanation, not a very good one, I'm afraid. And so the universe is itself self-sustaining and negentropic, and there's no beginning and no end, right? So this goes out. Big Bang theory, any of that theory, Big Bang is okay, but it's not the beginning. It is another emanation or phenomena of something that has no beginning. In other words, it's more like a change that happened in the cosmic order, but it is by no means, and it's completely wrong to associate it with a beginning. And this has already been critiqued by some of the scientists of the highest emanations. Hanne Alfvén from Sweden, Walter Russell, the plasma cosmology. That's already been canceled. But again, it's the myth that everybody wants to believe, right? Because in that insecurity, on the metaphysical level, we not only need the God, the All Father, but we need the beginning and the end, because what are they? They're structures. It's like a horse race, right? It's like familiar. Like hamsters need a clock ticking. If they're alone, you put a ticking clock in there, and it could sleep. It feels that there's another animal there, or it feels that it's got comfort. Yeah. So our comfort is we can live now. No, take that away, and people go unmoored and uncomfortable. They can't deal with wonder. They can't see. The scientist wants to not only he studies the negentropy of the universe, but he wants to find out where it's plugged in. He's studying it to own it. He wants to put a meter in there. Better still, he wants to unplug it. Well, I want to find out where the universe is plugged in. Where's all that energy come from? Yeah, but it's not plugged in, mate. It's self-sustaining. No. All that energy has to come from somewhere. See, so they're in their mysteria. The religious man is in his mysteria. And given the science, if he could find it, you think he's Nazim Haramein or he's Walter Russell? He wants to unplug the fucking thing. Goes, how does this work? We own it now. Patent it quick. Get Mr. Rockefeller and put a price on it. Well, see, the universe is too big for you bastards. No. So the mystic lives in wonder of it, the unknown, the thing that cannot be answered. If there's no beginning and no end, what is your mind going to do with that theory? Well, that's the sheep from the goats. One man gets all disturbed existentially by that and goes, no, I'm telling you, there was a beginning of all of this. And the other guy goes, I can handle the open-endedness and the wonder of that. I come to the universe now in a different way. some mystic said, or poet, he said, if the stars came out but once a year, the streets would be filled with people looking up in wonder.
Oh,
Not a
yeah.
house, not a person would be in their house. Oh, sure, they come out every day. So why worry about it? Why notice it at all? So we have lost this sense of wonder, right? And that there is God to me. Not God as a Jesus or some of Muhammad or any of that crap. Wonder at the mystery is the godly. And very much on the practical level, then it is the connection that you have with nature. Is my answer to that. In simple. One could elaborate, but that I think sums it up.
Beautifully answered. Thank you. So with that being said, I guess if you were to have a spiritual practice, for you that would be nature, right?
Oh, let nature be your guide. Like I said, you could elaborate. There's a lot of things one could get into there, but I think the Umwelt is the great sustainer. And all that man has created on it is mostly just junk. He prefers it. He's got a taste for junk, and the true sages, they never get hurt. I mean, the really important sages, and they come from all walks of life. They're left wing, they're right wing, they're Christian, they're non-Christian, they're atheists. See, I listen to everybody. I'm not interested in anything else. These pearls of wisdom, some of the people two or three of the people I recommended on that list are Christians.
Yeah.
For fuck's sake, right? I mean, that doesn't matter to me. If I'm reading Dostoevsky or I'm reading, Gabriel Marcel or Kierkegaard, I'm not fussed that they're Protestant or Catholic. I'm looking, right? I'm immune to that. I'm looking for the truth. And you're quite right. Yeah, nature is the go-to in many senses. But like I said, I will be doing things on pantheism down the line. This is part of the plan, because there's also a thing called pandeism, and there's another thing called panentheism. Jesus, all subsumed under sort of a mystical naturalism. Everybody's different take on it. So it's quite an elaborate thing, actually, to get into. But for me, yeah, absolutely. Nature is a great mystery. See, you pick up a flower or a leaf or a snowflake, like I said, and there's the geometry of the universe in it. There's the Trinity, there's the pentacle, there's the pentagram. And so you can hold that in your hand. You can't hold God in your hand. You can't hold angels and supernatural realms or heavens and hells in your hand. But I can hold the geometry of the universe has presented me here and now, visible to my senses. I can examine that snowflake and marvel at the geometry in it, right here and now. And I, the holder, am filled with the phi ratio, my geometry of my even form. I could be ugly as sin, but the universe's mark, its signature, is in my proportions. Phi ratio, Fibonacci series, golden section. I'm marveling at outside. I am its embodiment. I am anthropos. I don't need no fucking Jesus, except in some comic book, beginner ladybug level of go, oh, all right, man of God and all that. No, you are the being of God. You are Adam Kadmon. And as Ayn Rand then puts it in the most concrete way, since you are the head of the food chain and the highest thing, because self-conscious beings are the highest of all things, whether they know it or not, do you have the psychoepistemology? In other words, big fancy ugly word to say, do you value that you are a thinking rational being? Anyone on this planet can think. Even people in Belfast can actually think. But who amongst anyone who's a thinker is there a completely daily valuation? I am a thinking being. That's psychoepistemology. Not just that the person thinks, but that you are aware of you're grateful for being that being, and you value it and you keep it precious. That's a totally different being. That's, if there is a Superman in the Nietzschean sense, Ayn Rand found it. It's the person who is thinking and aware of the preciousness of that thinking, and they are then a very different being. They walk in the world in a totally different way. They're not destructive. So this can be taught to children in 5 minutes. How come it isn't?
How we forget.
Yeah. Classrooms filled with people told to think about it, until it melts. You're not even thinking about fuck all. And you're certainly, but in all that teaching, in all the collegiates of the world, and this woman who taught this isn't even included in the American dictionaries and encyclopedias of philosophy. But fucking Anton Zizek, right? And Jacques Derrida and Richard fucking asshole Rorty, they're all front page. But Ayn Rand, who taught one of the most valuable lessons in life, how to value your own capacity to think and to revere it as religious, as holy, that you are holy, like I said, you embody anyway, but you're not conscious of what you embody. Well, you would fucking take your gods and get out of here. I don't want to know about that. If I'm not holy in myself, if my every thought and action is not a holy one, if my journey, you talked about the hero's journey, right? If I'm not able to bring holiness from within and meaning from within, why are you trying to sell me on some fucking, from the outside circus? Why are you trying to get the organ grinders monkey to fucking sell me some plastic shit? And look at our world. What is it made of, our world? So again, I include Ayn Rand as part of the Western mystical tradition. Funny thing to say, because she was a bit down on mysticism. Yeah, but hers is the high mysticism that we need to nurture our being, our very souls, because there is a soul. There is the core under all the armoring and the bullshit and the left brain constructions and the fuck knows what else, the emotional plague.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a true light in there. And if it wasn't, you couldn't tell falsity. A lot of what we're talking about here is the difference between truth and falsity. But if I can examine something that's false, doesn't it presume that that's in contrast to the true? So the enemy has the keys of our salvation. The evil in the world and the deconstruction in the world, all the falsity in the world. I've said it from day one. The falsity in the world is the key to your liberation. You've got to do the apophatic work, which includes psychology, mostly a lot of psychology, because it's not just you running around critiquing other things external to you. It's using that, that corrosive within to melt away the emotional plague and the stuff that holds you from being an organic biological being. Biophilia, not necrophilia. The people you're meeting all over the world, even though they pay lip service to truth, they're necrophilous. And 2 minutes looking at their existence can tell you that. How they treat their animals, how they treat their children. In one of the podcasts, I don't know if it was, Age of Manipulation, I showed these pictures of the mothers with their children on these fucking leashes and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, that's just fucking fine. That is. Oh, and parents more in control. I know you've had guests on talking about the merits of homeschooling. Yeah, okay. But what about the downsides?
Mm-hmm.
We've had John Coleman on, a great educator, 4 podcasts. People should go and listen to those because he's a homeschooler educator too. But there are negative aspects to it, and those need to be brought into the argument as well. And Soma, right? The breaking down of the armoring is another very, very key element, and so there's many factors in this, but the sensitization is very key to what I'm into. That if there was a God in the way that is presented by religion, wouldn't you need to be highly intuitive and sensitive as a person to even listen to it? Or you think those fuckers on stage in the mega churches, the foolery of it all. But the big father figure, by which my weak identity needs as one of the coordinates to stay, I need my God, I need my enemies. Well, this is what is inherited when you turn to religion. Like I said, the Christians and the Jews, they are what they are because of enemies. But they're manufactured enemies. If I didn't have one, I'd have to invent it. Because my core identity is based in fucking nothing.
Yeah.
So when I talk about mystical naturalism, I'm talking about Odinism, mate. I'm talking about, the ancient traditions of the North and the West, where individualism was born. And it's still in the front outside Western lands, even though now it's been blackened and turned to dust here. There's a different spirit, and of course, anybody talks about that, they're shadow banned or deplatformed. But everybody else's tradition is put behind glass. It's sacred. And then it's overwritten, a very, very deep archive of knowledge, in our world that is really fine. And that's what I studied, when I studied the Irish, the pre-Celts, and the Nordic tradition and all of that. There's something really, really profound, and it has nature at its base. And then the weirdest thing of all, which I show in the Trees of Life books that I did, is that every god is a manifestation of a physical element in nature. All the gods, Jupiter, Zeus, every god in the Indian pantheon. In fact, they let three go that you can actually quickly see. One is Ganesha, who's an elephant, Hanuman, which is a monkey, because these were the species that we used to live with, and we were in participation with them. You want to know where truth is? In the eyes of an elephant or a great whale, if you can find one. I think they got one for the kiddies in San Francisco. On the mesa at night with a coyote standing on it, and a little small green patch of grass in Sweden with a little hare sitting on it in the morning dew. I'll tell you where you can find truth. Right? In the black satin wings of a crow. It's all around you. It's all around you. But we've edited that. We've Umwelt needs to be resurrected. Umwelt needs to be resurrected. When's the last time you went out and thanked the light or talked to it? When did you last welcome the day in the morning when you opened your eyes and saw the light? Did you take it into yourself? Did you welcome it as a brother? Hell no. But you want God's. Yeah. What a tragedy.
Yeah.
Did you kiss it? The air, the wind, the rain? Did you jump for joy? When's the last time that you looked at a mountain in awe? Or looked at the sky? Like I said, the stars, if they came out but once a year, no house would be, they'd be emptied. Oh, everyone in the whole world would come out to look up. What happened to that wonder? What happened to that astonishment? People are paying lip service to it. And look what the horrors that they're committing on Earth all around. Well, it's just a background. It's just that natural stuff. It's just decoration. It's just a background for us. And look how we've treated it. So yeah, you can stuff it. You can stuff your fucking gods and religions. That's not where I'm at.
I'm right there with you, Michael. Yeah. And I'm blown away too that we moved more to a natural environment a couple of years ago, and your words you just said are even more of a reminder for me, because I could get caught up in my day to day and my computer and doing what I have to do, and yet when I walk outside, I'm not in an urban environment. I hear the sounds of nature like I've never heard them before, and yet there's times where I take it for granted, instead of maybe sitting down on a chair and looking up for 10 minutes, just
Oh yeah.
you know.
You never should take it for granted. It's
Yeah.
all around you, and it's speaking to you constantly. Time is speaking to you. You don't even hear it. Another thing we could go into is what time is and things like that. And we've bowdlerized that. We've made that technology. It measures only the falsity of our life. It measures our entire inauthenticity. Time is something so much more than that. Time is your best friend, but you must know how to listen to it, to be guided by it, same as we need to be guided by nature. And there's not much nature left. Some people have more access, others don't. But see, the Meister Eckhart himself, I think it was, or it was Angelus Silesius said, the rose knows nothing of itself, and yet it gives of its own perfume. It's not just beautiful in its physical self, and Conan Doyle reiterated this in one of his books. The rose is not only beautiful to look at, it exudes even a perfume for you. There's nothing but abundance. There's only yielding. There's only a manifestation of the cosmic order, or the universal, the moral universe, as I call it. And that's written inside yourself. Now, the signature of the moral universe was this geometry, in your being, in your actual phi ratio and all of that. That is the signature, so no thick head walking around could ever doubt that the mark, the signature of the divine is in them, as well as the fire within that we said, which is the ultimate core. Now, you can call that the photonic energy, you can call it the bioenergy, the prana, the chi, whatever term you want to give to it. That is also, the sort of microcosmic example of the macrocosmic order. But finally, that breaks down. The real love of nature, and if you use nature as a guide, these divisions will, pass away. Not so that you're individual consciousness is erased, which is what happens with the Gnostic paths you asked earlier, or anything about Eastern mysticism, in which you have complete annihilation of identity. No, no, no. Your identity is maximized, right? It's not negated like all the other religions. Nature is not going to do that. Nature has already written in you as an identity. It created your identity. Why would it want to erase it? The horror of these paths, these fucking turban heads and all the rest of them. My God, what lies they've been teaching the world. Yeah, because they want you all dead. They want you spiritually dead. It's like a tyrant like Napoleon or fucking Stalin who wants you physically dead, right? Some psychopath. Do you know what we're ruled by on a higher level? Psychopaths who want us spiritually dead, and they fucking infected this world with all this fucking Gnosticism and shit. They want you to be spiritually dead. It's not good enough just to take your body. They want your soul. And we don't even know where our greatest friend is. We don't even know where the instructor is. So we become party of the crime. We're turning ourselves into orcs. It's insane. But again, you need that simplicity and that sensitivity. You see, these are things you need to lead you to the holy place. And then when you're instructed in that, there's no erasure of your identity, as is promised in Christianity. I'm going to merge with God. There'll be no more me or any of the other junk. No, the true self is brought forth, the imperial self, which walks, what a violation. Half the religions we believe in are violent. They're telling you about the erasure of the self, like it is in a collective, group where your self is, basically erased. Well, all the religions are promising that, but they have to do it. They give you a carrot first, right? Obviously. Nature asks nothing from you of such a thing. It will only, embellish your sense of self because it wants the love affair. It wants you to fall in love with it. Well, how the fuck is that going to be an erasure of your identity? So, it's not your enemy, and therefore there can be no conflict. Even in the conflict of nature, once it has its conflictual elements, that's to teach you something. That's an incredible story there, which one can get into. But the proof of what I'm saying, though, is in almost, and I'm not one of these, climate gay types or whatever. We have destroyed nature. There is also an element of truth to that there is a great violation of nature. It can be corrected. And ultimately, anything that we do to violate nature is not going to affect nature. That's why I'm not one of these World Economic Forum, people who believe in extinction events and all of that. When I say nature, I'm talking about something so vast that anything we do is so insignificant you can't even measure it. It's also a part of our egoism to believe that we can really change the planet or the what do they call it? The temperature and the climate. Yeah. I think I smell a bit of egotism in there, mate. You can kill all of the life. You can kill all the planet. It isn't going anywhere. You are going to implode. Killing that planet is killing ourselves. We'll be the ones gasping. So that's just nonsense. But nevertheless, there is an instinct within us, a deep antipathy to nature, the counterpoint of what I've been talking about, whereby we have destroyed nature. We're destroying it all the time. And then we're putting up ugly buildings that have no features and no aesthetic qualities and all of the rest of it. So that is, and then just the cities themselves, the concrete, the steel, they can be made differently. Some places have done it, but no, that's all gone. And even quite beautiful cities have been transformed into ugly places. So that also factors into this, that there's something in us that is so deeply antithetical to nature, the natural order. And I've explored that from my first books about what that is and how it came about. And that ancestral trauma, until we've dealt with that and unplugged it, we're not really going to be able to go back to nature in any kind of healthy way, no matter what. And that's pretty awful, because there is a wound. Nature did, in fact, wound us, or at least that was our perception. And from thousands of years ago, we then sort of, hate nature for what we perceived that it did at times of the great cataclysms. So this is a wound. This is a aberration of consciousness that needs to be dealt with, and that's why psychology is also very needed. When I say these things, I mean it. One has to go in there, and now, of course, you can do it personally, in which you just go back to nature in a different way. You actually do it by going and reintroducing yourself to nature. But we don't do that. We bungee jump, we skydive, we surf, we go to nature all right as a recreational theme park. No, that's not what I meant. Not that I'm negating those things. That's one mode of going into nature, but it's not the ultimate spiritual, way that really matters. It's going to be how you see. Because remember, it's not going to nature; it's the way that you go to nature. Is really better said. It's the way that you do things, not the what that you're doing. So the New Agers, and all these religions, you're reading the manual, reading the instructions, and it's the what. I'm a Christian, ain't I? I'm a fucking Jehovah's Witness, ain't I? Right? No. How are you those things? And in terms of what we're talking about, it's not just going to nature. Any idiot can do that. In fact, there's people who live in nature exclusively. It doesn't mean they're one iota better. Look at farmers. They're some of the biggest destroyers of nature are the ones who live in it. So don't get me wrong. It's not about, I live in nature, I'm a hermit. How do I know what your thinking is? It's not the going to nature. It's the way in which you move into it and walk into it, and the intention that you have to greet it, to have open eyes, to be sensitive to it, and to let it instruct you. So all the clatter, all the noise of our life is to prevent us from doing that. Actually, the fact that there's no silence anymore, not even at night, that the lights in the city are continually on, so you can't even see the stars or the horizon or anything like that. You can't hear the coyote howling. You can't. Like I said, the Vedic tradition, all its gods were originally based. So you had Hanuman, and you had Ganesha, and then you even had Shiva. Shiva comes from a god called Pashupati, who is exactly identical to Hern, the pre-Celtic god of the West. Remember, I was lauding the West. Yeah, those gods got over, and they were natural. The fire god, Agni, the sky god, right? And on it goes. All the gods of the original Indian pantheon are based in fire. In fact, the entire history, all Sanskrit, the whole language is based on birdsong. All the sounds of Sanskrit and Urdu. In Africa, their entire pantheon of gods is based in insects, butterflies, dragonflies. When's the last time you've seen a hare? When's the last time you've seen a hedgehog? Yeah, and those are still there. Shiva was Pashupati, lord of the deer, the stag god. And in India, it was anthropomorphized as Shiva. But it's an animal god. And the farther you go back in any of these pantheons, you find, the animals. The Egyptian gods mostly all have animal heads. Any fucking wild guess why that is? Because in Africa, the insects, and especially the baboon, and they would really meticulously listen to the sounds of the baboon, right? And they found out that the calls of the baboon synchronized with the moon cycle. So it became the moon god. You see how it works? So all the different gods you could name represent the nature, the natural elements, until the priests got hold of it. Well, I don't fucking any of that, right? And they had you under their control. And nature is then denigrated by these Gnostic groups. Gnosticism is nothing more than the most ultimate form of the negation of nature, where the world is nothing but a prison of the soul, and even your body is included in that. Some nasty, horrible, smelly thing the enlightenment is meaning getting away from it as fast as possible. But along comes Gerald Massey, along comes Alfred Boyd Kuhn, and goes, yeah, that thinking is the Maya. The illusion you're caught in is not the nature of the cage of the soul. It's your attitude toward it, you fucking... And out goes the whole of Eastern mysticism, leaving fucking, 2 guys left in the room. The whole thing has been... Can you throw it out under one genius's thought? You sees through the whole thing. A fucking Alexander the Great sword right through the Gordian knot. I worship those people. Yeah. Those are the altars you need to start building, mate. But otherwise you're going through it and following a tradition. My peer, they were Sikhs, or they were Hindus, or they were the Jains, or they were, and I'm just following right along with that. And I'll tell you that almost every religion that you could even name goes back to nature worship. By the way, they call it pagan now. Yeah, what the fuck? But when you even look at the meanings of those words, you'll find out something extraordinary. That the word heathen just meant one who wouldn't conform. Did you know that the word idiot goes back to Rome, Latin, which means one who wouldn't conform? That's actually what the word idiot means, is the one who doesn't conform and listen to anybody else. Here he sits.
Three of us.
Three idiots.
Yeah. Look at this. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Well, that's conformity. Because again, conformity is the little man who needs not only the crowd to secure him, but he needs the enemy. And every crowd has its enemy. Look at our streets today. And so the man who steps aside from the crowd, like I recommended people start with Colin Wilson's wonderful books, The Outsider and Beyond the Outsider. Is a great introductory, easy to read, brilliant writer, brilliant man. You're the outsider at that point. And with that outsidership comes a lot of good, but also then the feeling of being ostracized and cut off. And for a lot of people, especially beta types, they can't handle it. So they have to go back and knock on the door. Let me in. I'll conform even more. Sorry for being Captain Kirk and asking God why he needs a spaceship. Yeah, see, no. And so look at our world today. There's no. And if there is, see, don't forget, they've cut us off at the past. They know that you can't live as a complete conformist all your life. So they create pseudo-individualism, faux versions of religion and spirituality, the New Age movement. They got you. They know that you couldn't live as a prisoner in chains of iron. So they give you chains of gold. You go, fucking brilliant, love this. This is great. The unslaved, right? Yeah, right. The enslaved. And you're self-enslaved. So they know that you can't live just as some urban moron. So they provided a million different paths for you, right? And sure, I'm not saying it's easy then to find the greats. Nobody's saying that. I'm not talking about spinner rack shit. But what I've done instead is commit 30 years of my life to, being a public figure in this minor way in order to then, be a go-to so that, at least the recommendations I would make, and it was great that you asked, that's my job, is just to be a signpost, a lollipop man to say, well, I think I'll try that out. But it doesn't mean that you'll like it. It doesn't mean that you won't throw it down. A vast majority of people I've ever, spoken to in that way actually have rejected and gone right back to Christianity or to Gnosticism. That's, quite painful to see, but it's inevitable. You'd be dumb if you didn't realize that there's going to be, a blowback on some of these things. Because as I said, being an outsider is very, very difficult. It may mean, leaving a lot behind and changing your thinking in ways that cause you a lot of grief. So it's not an easy road by any means.
Yeah. Well, we can keep talking and talking and talking. And Michael, I really appreciate you coming on. For anyone that's listening, go to Unslaved. That platform changed my life. Had a huge impact on my wife as well. I've told this story before, but we did a road trip. I don't know how many years ago, and it was 25-hour drive, and all we did was listen to Unslaved episodes for 25 hours on the road trip from Switzerland to Rome, and it had a huge impact on me. So, thank you, man. I tell you this all the time. I got love for you, bro. I really do, and I really appreciate you, man.
You listen to the audio, right?
Yeah, audio.
Yeah, the MP3 is great.
Yeah, we were just listening to them. So go to unslaved.com, go to michaeltsarion.com to see everything Michael's done. Yeah, anything else you want to share, or Joel, you want to say anything?
There's absolutely no doubt that Unslaved is the cutting edge for any single human being on this path. Anyone truly looking to really develop a sense of authenticity, to get to the real bottom of things and to understand the truth and to see the world in new eyes, and to actually come to a place where you can exalt yourself, you can begin to cleanse yourself, develop your own psychic hygiene, and then you can use yourself as the mirror to see the beauty that does exist all around you. I'll just echo everything that Yerasimos has said, and I greatly appreciate the fact that you're here, Michael, and we can share this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah. Members are making it possible beyond, my expectations, actually. And they're seeking for psychic sovereignty. You're right. The psychic hygiene is the attribute of the outsider. Yeah. That's why it's difficult. He's got to now work on his psychic sovereignty. He's got to work on his discernment. He's got to do this apophatic learning. And, moving from just good skepticism, it's good to be skeptical, but then to build upon that, because skepticism can be very corrosive. And then you find out there's nothing built. So, that's a good place to start. But then, the next part is to then find what is your vocation. It's quite easy in life to find people who know what they don't want to do. They get a star for that. But wait a minute, knowing what you don't want to do can be all lifelong. how do you find out what you want to do? How do you find what you're here for, on this planet? And people have a very vague idea of what that is, so they need some direction. This is a flaw I've noticed a lot, but it's our members that keep this going, so that I can get this lifetime of knowledge out. And you guys have been on the show, and I recommend people go listen to those, because the last one we did with Yerasimos there was on human design. I mean, that's just absolutely fucking mind-boggling. We've done ones with you, Joel, as well. So you guys are welcome back on the show in the future to dig into more different things. You've had some fine guests yourself on there, stunning stuff, actually, some of them. So yeah, it's all good, and again, you see messages of truth going out, and then you see it being deplatformed, right? Things like that. Isn't that exactly what we're saying? Right? That we're not taught. A lot of what we're dealing with is blocks. I said it in Architects of Control. If man is not flying with the wings that he's already been given toward the truth and the real, there's blocks in the way. And so we must discover what those blocks are. And then discovering them for ourselves, don't just fucking head up the mountain path. Remove that block for the ones coming behind you.
Yeah.
So guys, thanks a lot.
For
this.
And real quick, you mentioned Architects of Control. Anyone listening, watching this, go check out Architects of Control too. That's something that impacted me early on, and something that's coming to me right now. You have a great program on psychic vampirism, which is incredible, and I think necessary to have the psychic hygiene to sniff out some of these characters in your lives.
Cool.
That's a whole nother conversation. We'll have to get you on just to talk about psychic vampirism.
Yeah. It's a great subject, actually.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks so much for today.
No, absolute pleasure, Michael. Hey, quickly, did you end up finding out your human design type?
No,
Okay.
I haven't gone that far. This is all new to me, the human design thing. So I tend to pursue it.
Awesome.
I love all of that stuff. Yeah,
Cool.
And it seemed very valid.
Yeah, I look forward to you exploring it further. It's very, very, very interesting. Guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Michael, absolute pleasure, and we'll see you guys next time.
Same here, mate.
Sometimes in life, things come full circle. And for me, that was 100% one of those moments. What we have, our meeting, this podcast, our group coaching program, none of it would be possible if it wasn't for Unslaved and if it wasn't for the work of the man you just listened to for 2 hours, Michael Tsarion, who's an absolute legend and a treasure on this planet and in this community. That being said, also, guys, we've just launched round 3 of Rise Above the Herd. New dates have been announced. So if you are interested and would like to apply, you can now do so at riseabovetheherd.com.au. We thoroughly hope you enjoyed that episode, and we'll see you next time.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time, they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean, fast forward in evolution to a place where we can share our confusions. Yeah, 450 BC, I'm sharing tea with confusion.